Mr. Dipanjan Roy Chaudhary, Senior Assistant Editor, The Economic Times, India. Mr. Benny Leo Woon Kin, Editor, Eastern Horizon, Malaysia. And Professor Monsak Shai Viragdek, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Journalism and Mass Communication, Thammasat University, Thailand.
So, we also have a few presentations.
There is a series of publication from the VIF to the speakers and moderators as well.
Some of our publications of the VIF.
Maybe the entire panel and Dr. Gupta can stand for a photograph, group photograph. Thank you. We will now break for lunch. We are running late by 1 hour. May I please request everyone to be back by 2:45 p.m. Thank you. Lunch is being served downstairs. Thank you, sir.
Buddha. Situated in the holy land of Nepal, Lumbini has always been an important Buddhist pilgrimage center for monks and devotees from the 3rd century BC. Approved by the Nepal government in 1978, the Lumbini master plan is spread across a sprawling area of 8 square kilometers with 3 zones: the sacred garden, the monastic zone, and the new Lumbini village. The International Buddhist Confederation humbly greets you to experience the miracle of feeling oneness with Lord Buddha and at peace with oneself. Nestled within the monastic zone of Lumbini, to experience, reflect, and rever the sacred story of Buddha's life teachings, we bring to you a state-of-the-art project, India International Center for Buddhist Culture and Heritage. The design visualization of this beautiful building springs from the story of Buddha's birth, when he took 7 steps immediately after being born. At each holy step of this newborn, a lotus flower bloomed, symbolizing the idea of this majestic 3-storied structure with alternating blue water bodies and green landscape stairway to reach the main level of the building. Just as the Buddha, calm from outside, and a contemplative power force from the inside, similarly the building appears like a composed structure from the outside, but is a limitless knowledge source from the inside. This architectural marvel will be committed to Nepal's goal of net zero greenhouse emissions by 2045. As we enter the building, we are led to the first floor where we arrive at the Grand Welcome Area or the Agaman Sthal. This space will serve as an orientation zone of the premises, its routes and facilities provided. Moving towards the prayer hall or the Vandana Sthal, you witness a beautiful modern-day chaitya built with a massive capacity to accommodate both devotees and visitors. Pray peacefully with acoustically treated surfaces to achieve a sound, safe environment, bringing you a sense of complete calm while you pray. The power of devotional ambience in the surroundings will guide you to the meditation hall or Dhyana Sthal. Devotees can pause, reflect and meditate here with the Buddhist chants of Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. From the serene calm of Dhyana Sthal, we proceed towards the Padmapani Interpretation Center. For our visitors, this center gives an immersive experience about Buddha's birth story and dream of Mahamaya through digital screens, Buddha's teachings through projection mapping, and a powerful glimpse towards his journey of Nirvana through holographic exhibits. To gain a greater understanding of Buddhism and many philosophical ideas, visit the library or the Gyanasthal. Research scholars can consult rare books and recent publications that have been methodically sourced from different parts of the world. For our millennials, the library is digitally equipped with modern-day technology. Between the Interpretation Center and the library, the third jewel is completed by the Three Ratna Art Gallery, which has been especially curated as a space for exhibiting rare Buddhist art collections. A special exhibition on the popular Jataka stories will be an added attraction for the devotees. Bringing a holistic experience that is both devotional and recreational, this resource center offers world-class facilities in areas such as the cafe, guest rooms and the staff quarters. A boardroom and a conference room will be available to facilitate corporate off-site programs too. Use of solar energy has been made to provide clean energy for 365 days of the year. Setup of active elements which ensures the building mass is converted into an efficient energy bank. This helps to keep you cool with radiant cooling. The sustainable building structure would reduce carbon footprint and contribute less amount of greenhouse gas to the atmosphere during its overall operations. So come, join us at India International Center for Buddhist Culture and Heritage at Nepal. It welcomes you for an exceptional experience to reflect, relax, and witness the pilgrimage of modern times in Lumbini, the start of Buddha's journey where life comes to a full circle.
Thank you for everyone who's come back timely. We'll start with the second session and maybe people can still come up slowly. The second session of the second International Buddhist Media Conclave is on the application of mindful communication in conflict avoidance. Mindful communication, rooted in Buddhist teachings, emphasizes understanding, compassion, and non-violence. This session will focus on how these principles can be applied to media practices to avoid conflict and promote peace. This session, we have moderator as Khenso Rinpoche Nicholas Vreeland, Chairman of Buddha Dhamma and Media Publicity Awareness Committee of IBC and former abbot of Rato Dratsang Monastery in the US. The speakers of this panel session are Dharmacharya Shantam Seth, Mr. Odragit Jaja, Dr. Prashant Sharma, Ms. Amy Haley Hayakawa, and Mr. Piyush Kulekshetra. Over to you, Venerable.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here at the Vivekananda International Foundation for this conference, or this, I know it's not called, it's an International Buddhist Media Conclave. I'm honored to be chairing this, and I've been asked to speak very briefly, so I shall speak very briefly. I'm happy to be with my 5 speakers, whom I will introduce one by one before they speak. But I just wanted to take a moment to say, as we discuss the application of mindfulness, mindful communication in conflict avoidance, the most important aspect of this is something that I feel that my colleague Geshe Dorje Damdul addressed this morning when he talked about the importance of working on our own ethics. And I think that this was really well treated this morning by the different speakers. And as he reminded us, and I wish to reiterate, were the Buddha to be alive today, he wouldn't be teaching as a Buddhist or teaching Buddhism. He would be teaching ethics in a secular way. He would be teaching how to behave in virtuous ways and the techniques by which we can work towards refrain from non-ethical behavior. I feel that the whole way by which ethics would be applied to something like media was beautifully expressed by Mr. Benny Liao Wong Kin this morning when he talked about something that I think is fundamental, which is the importance of applying these things to ourselves. Yes, we can come together, and yes, we can talk about societal structures, we can talk about the training of people, we can talk about all these aspects of cultivating an outside structure, I'll call it, but the most important thing is the work that we as individuals do on ourselves in order to bring about a mindful communication that can lead to conflict avoidance. So this having been said, I look forward to hearing the way in which each of the members of this panel address how we go about making our own changes that bring about changes in society. So let us begin with my friend Shantum Seth, who's sitting right next to me here. And just to get his biography perfect, Mr. Dharmacharya Shantum Seth. And Shantum is the 43rd generation teacher in the Linchi Dhyan lineage, and was ordained as a Dharmacharya by the really important, wonderful master of our time, Thich Nhat Hanh, in 2001. Shantum has been teaching, leading pilgrimages with the wonderful title, In the Footsteps of the Buddha. So with that, I leave the floor to my friend Shantum.
So thank you very much for inviting me to this august gathering. I'm particularly privileged that I'm sitting between 2 monastic brothers and with others who will also be sharing on the same subject, but also hearing this morning from really wonderful speakers and people who've seeded new sort of ways of looking at reality for me. And I really liked Guru Murthyji's understanding of ideology and philosophy, which I'd really, is such an obvious one, but I hadn't really seen it that way. But, we all communicate. That is our karma. We don't only communicate in words, we communicate with facial gestures, with body language, all our actions, our speech, our thoughts. That is all part of our sort of communication apparatus in a way. So that is what we put into the world, and that's what remains after we've left. So how we think, how we speak, how we act, and Benny G very kindly shared about right speech, developed on that particular theme. And so everything we say or do or think bears our signature in that way. And if our thinking is full of discrimination and hate, that will very obviously translate into violence. And then if we think if we can cultivate that insight of interdependence, where we see that the other's suffering is our suffering, the other's happiness is our happiness, then we can develop understanding and compassion, and of course, more peaceful speech and action. So, but that is communication. So does mindful communication. So mindful communication is very much about being aware of how we're communicating. What is that thought process? So in fact, what is our intentions and possible consequences? We never know exactly what the consequences are, but we at least can reflect on it a little bit and see from previous experience what might be the results of such a thing. And as my dear friend, elder brother, says, we have to start with ourselves. This morning, I think Dr. Verma talked about how do you train journalists. And I think it's very, very important that we train journalists how to develop a calm, a peaceful mind, and one which can respond appropriately rather than reactively. So that's also about, the whole of the Buddha's teachings, as I can see, is a sort of mind training. But mind not just as the brain, but as the heart. And so we also cultivate the heart in that process of the training. We have limited time, but I want us to, Gurumurti ji said something else that was interesting. He said in the chanting, it's an abstract type of, abstract phenomenon in a way, but it united all of us. So I was going to invite a bell. I use this as my meditation bell every day. And I thought that we can invite the bell and just listen to the sound. So we're all actually listening to the same sound. So it's connecting us in a very interesting sort of way. The Sangha, as a community, has much greater strength than an individual. And then just to use that to follow our breath. That's how I start my meditation, and that's how I even complete my meditation. So I just come back to my breath and using the sound and then petering off and coming back to the awareness of the breath. So I'll just guide it along. We'll just have for maybe a minute, and then I'll come back. I call this a bell of mindfulness. So it's a type of communication through the bell, through the sound. And we think of it in our practice as the voice of the Buddha calling us back to our true home, to our true self. And where's our home? What's the zip code, the pin code? HEREANDNOW. Here and now. So let's use our breath to bring our mind and body into the present moment. Our bodies are here, but our mind may be somewhere else. Just coming back, using the sound and then the breath. You find it easier to follow your breath, you can put your hand on your abdomen and just feel the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen. Breathing in, I know I'm alive. Breathing out, I smile to life. So friends, this 9 breaths, maybe a few had shorter breaths, longer breaths, just allows us to come back to ourselves. And we don't need to be great meditators for this. I use my telephone as an instrument for my meditation. Every time my telephone rings, I never pick it up for first 3 times. The first bell, I stop. Right now I put it on silent, but if it rang, I would just stop. Second, I come back to my breath. And the third, I smile. And then I say, oh, hello, Emmy. Hello, Abhijitji. So it's like that. So I'm present for the person. In fact, before I call, I use this also. I think of the person. I feel my voice can travel hundreds of miles. May they be as beautiful as gems. May they create some sort of happiness, peacefulness, compassion, rather than... And otherwise, the normal habit is the phone rings. Hello. It's like an interruption. And then on my phone, every half hour, and on my computer, every half hour, I have the same bell recorded. Sometimes you can get into the zone, and I just stop. And I pause. I use 3 breaths. I come back into the moment. I normally have a flower. Hello, the flower still smiling? Good. I'm still smiling. So it's a sort of creating a sense of well-being in myself, because we're dealing with many, many important issues in the world. And many of us are involved with strategy and international relations. But until we can create a calm and peaceful mind, that is going to impinge on us and train us in a rather negative way sometimes. So silence is very, very important. And spending some time with oneself so that we can really look at our afflictive mental states, like people mentioned, about whether it's jealousy or hatred or othering of some sort. In fact, silence is interesting. Somebody was talking this morning about an appropriate response. I think it was Mr. Verma, I can't remember. Benny, I think. And in fact, the Buddha used silence as an appropriate response too. There was a Jain monk who came to meet him, and the Jain monk said, is there a self? And the Buddha stayed silent. Then he said, well, that means there's no self. Again, he was silent. So when the Buddha went away, Ananda asked Buddha, said, you're always telling us that there's no self. Why didn't you tell him? He said he has a very determined view. He has a particular view, and it'll cause him suffering if I push that right now. So there's an appropriateness to when you respond, and also silence could have been used like that. I'm reminded of a time when my own teacher, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, was in India in 2008. He was invited by the Indian government. He gave a talk in Parliament. But he was also invited by the Times of India to be the guest editor for the 2nd of October, Gandhi Jayanti, Gandhi's birthday. So on the 1st of October, we were sitting in the editorial room, and somebody talked about an editorial room, what it's like. It's like an operation theater, maybe. Anyway, Thich Nhat Hanh is there with his editors, and we hear of a bomb blast in Tripura while we're there. And the journalists ask him, what should we do? How do we report this? And first he went silent. He went into his breathing. He went back to his breathing. And then he said something like, you have to tell the truth, but report it in such a way that we do not water seeds of fear, anger, and vengeance in the people. And then he went on to say that you have to sit as a practitioner, as a journalist, and look deeply and ask, why would someone do violence to innocent people? And when you look deeply, you will see that those who do the violence have a wrong perception of the situation. And they may even think that if they die in the explosion, they will go directly to heaven to join their God. Some may even think that killing others and dying themselves, they're doing the work of God. They think those on the other side are enemies of God. But you can see that this is wrong thinking, so you have great compassion for them. So whoever has such a view is living in a very dark world, and he suffers a lot. So he goes on to say that explain the story in such a way that the reader does not become enraged and perhaps become another terrorist. So we have to be very careful how we respond to these things. But of course, it's important to build understanding for conflict avoidance, and there are many, many practices. I used to work in the UN for 15 years at one point, and I ran a program on artisan development in Bhutan, India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. And we worked with bamboo workers. So we were going to do an exchange of artisans from different countries. And we decided to hold it in Tamil Nadu. But the Sinhalese said, we are not going to come. So we moved the location to Bengal, and then the Sinhalese came. Every day we do something common. So we took all the artisans into the forest to show each other how do you cut bamboo. And there were many touching moments in that whole 10-day session. But one of them was where the Tamil and the Sinhalese men were coming out of the forest with their hands over each other's, arms over each other's shoulders. And it brought tears to my eyes. And I was thinking here, of course, they have a commonality of being bamboo workers, but there's so much deep misunderstanding and hatred between the Tamils and Sinhalese at that time. And I'll end with one other example, is that in Plum Village, which is the center of, the monastic center for Thich Nhat Hanh, we often get Israelis and Palestinians to come together. We sponsor them and they come, maybe 10, 15 of them each. And we don't get them to speak immediately. We practice for 3 or 4 days first, doing walking meditation, sitting meditation, etc. And then we get everyone to sit together in a circle. And each one shares their own suffering. And everyone listens quietly. And after a few days, you realize the commonality of this human, of suffering, that is a human sort of experience. And you start getting compassion for the other. And by the end of these retreats, I remember once, they started cooking meals for the whole community. Over 1,000 people were there. They were singing a song together. So in a way, it's interesting how mindful communication is not just for conflict avoidance, but also for healing conflicts. And this can be done not just outwardly, but in the family, where you have compassionate speech, deep listening, which are the elements of trying to build this sort of mindful communication. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantum. And I'd like to just emphasize that the little bit of mindful breathing that we did at the beginning is really the essential element of assuming the responsibility of making the changes within ourselves. Our next speaker is the Venerable Odgari Jugder from Mongolia. And the Venerable is the head of the Ganden television at Ganden Tekchen Monastery, which is the center of Buddhism in Mongolia. And he is also a member of the administrative board of Ganden Tekchen Ling, and also a teacher in the Czech Republic. I look forward to hearing your speech.
Thank you. Thank you, Rinpoche. Namo Guruve, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya. Багшдар мөрөгмөө, Бурхан мөрөгмөө, Борсон хоорогдор мөрөгмөө. Сайн байцгаана уу? Good afternoon, all. Firstly, I'm greeting for our all these friends, IBC Director Halter, and also Secretary General of IBC, Janju Choti Rinpoche. Thank you, Rinpoche, inviting me. And also Arvind Gupta. Thank you. We know each other, many times meeting in Mongolia somewhere. And thank you very much, all guests and all delegates, every country. Thank you. There is a very important conclave we doing second. I really want to delegate that time, sharing our time, really want. I'm from Mongolia, but that time I'm directly from Europe. My topic is very huge for me, which you say. this is a mindful communication and also conflict avoidance that is a very huge, and also we can understand very directly. I can talk just few minutes, and also I'm talking our experience working, what happening over there, yeah, like that. What is conflict? And conflict has several meaning. One saying conflict is a fight or an argument, for example, an armed conflict, yeah. And the second one is a difference between two or more ideas, wishes, like that. Looking at this second meaning of this word, allow me to take example from my own experience working with the Ganden TV. Yeah, Ganden TV is a Buddhist TV owned and managed by Ganden Monastery, Center of Mongolian Buddhist. And as I'm director of Ganden TV, yeah, just leading our team, I have to ask myself, what is mindful communication? Firstly, when it comes to planning and executive TV program, as our TV is, although when it was founded, was we called firstly children and youth people, Ganden TVs. They're all about religion, also religious principles, morality, and ethics we doing. And secondly, what is the mindful communication? I'm asking also me. Scholars highlight 5 key elements of mindful communication. It's silence, mirroring, encouraging, discerning, and responding. That make it possible for us to listen more deeply to others and to develop greater clarity and confidence about how to respond. In addition to this, we have to also consider the following, which I think are important when designing and planning and executing our TV program. They are in identifying our communication patterns and habits, being often in the midst of difficult conversations so that we can respond wisely and skillfully, and learning how mindful communication can help us to become more truthful, compassionate, and flexible in our relationship. I will try to briefly go into these 4 topics based on my experience working with Ganden TV. It's identifying our communication patterns and habits. Ganden TV was established in 2022, and since we have been in daily 18-hour programs, and also I can't find answer to the question, have we ever reviewed and analyzed our communication patterns and habits? And the answer wouldn't be ever encouraging. We have not. This means some of our program patterns are not what our TV reviewers expect from us. Therefore, it is important to understand who our viewers are, what are their age categories, also their educational level, social status. Based on this, we have to plan our communication patterns. Second, being often in the midst of difficult conversations so that we can respond wisely and skillfully. Ideas and thoughts that we share on public platforms, such as TV, will not be accepted by everyone equally. There will be some who will accept what we communication, while some others will have questions about our communication, and still others will reject our thoughts and ideas. That's true. In Buddhism, we are taught to be mindful of and to others. And accordingly, when we plan and designing our communication, we must have this approach. Yeah, he told also, mind is not brain, yeah, it's from our heart. If we are able to understand the problems, questions, and doubts that our audience face, then we will be able to communicate our message in a manner that will prevent any kind of conflict of interest in thoughts. For example, in Mongolia, we have national broadcasting. They followed by Ganden TV, this serial from India. Yeah, we know Buddha, history of Buddha. Judging by the reaction of the TV viewers, mostly adults, expressed their thoughts about Buddhism and religion, but there were almost none, with very pure reaction or response on the part of the young peoples. This means there has to be differentiated approach according to the age, education, and also I told social status and interests of TV viewers. And lastly, what is meant by learning how mindful communication can help us to become more truthful, compassionate, and flexible in our relationship. If we at Ganden TV have a feedback channel from our viewers, we would be able to learn how to design our communication in a meaningful manner. That's not easy. Our country TV channel worked very truly and also very clearly, but we are trying day by day. Also, we can work together, build up all sharing, yeah? We would like to learn from our colleagues who have come here for the conclave to learn from their experience. And in this respect, our Ganden TV, I would like to thank again IBC, also Vivekananda International Foundation for hosting this conclave and the idea to set up a network of Buddhist media network under the all organization. Yeah, we believe that through this network we will not only be able to exchange programs but also share our experience on how we can be more mindful in our communication that promotes truth and compassion. We know, yeah. Honestly, we can find mindful communication, Buddha Dharma, yeah? I think. Thank you very much. Hear me, listen to me.
Thank you, Venerable Odgarid. What was particularly poignant, I thought, was the way you are actually applying, you are actually at work at what we're talking about with Ganden television. You are working not only on yourself, but you're working at developing the techniques by which that inner work can be reflected to the outside, to the public in Mongolia. And I hope that your time here will provide, here we have on our panel, we have Emmy from Korean television, Buddhist television, and this is the kind of networking that I hope will help us all not only work on ourselves, but bring that inner work into the world in a practical way. Thank you.
Thank you.
We go on to Dr. Prashant Sharma, a fellow Swiss citizen. We share Switzerland here. And Dr. Sharma is the founder of the Dharma Alliance, a global platform to protect, preserve, and promote Dharma philosophies, traditions, and practices. Now, I'm so fond of Dr. Sharma's writing that I'm going to read the whole next paragraph. Dharma Alliance was established in Geneva and seeks to influence global agendas, norms, and standards by mainstreaming Dharmic principles such as harmony, mutual respect, shared prosperity, and interconnectedness of all life in international dialogues and processes. When I read that, I thought, oh, this has everything. So I look forward to hearing from Dr. Sharma. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello? Yeah. Oh, well, sorry, is it just a button to... The right buttons to be pressed, always very difficult. Good afternoon, everyone. I especially would like to first and foremost say thanks to and of course acknowledge Shri Arvind Gupta, Director of VIF, the Most Venerable Secretary General of IBC, Abhijit Haldarji, the Director General of IBC, of course the moderator, Sir Nicholas Veland Rinpoche, Venerable monks, fellow panelists, of course, everyone, and of course, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by pointing out two things. Today is the 9th of September, which is, of course, if you remember, 9/11. So, I mean, that in some ways is embedded in the public memory as the emblematic example of conflict. On the other hand, 131 years ago, it was today on this date that Swami Vivekananda ji delivered the address to the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. So we have the other extreme, many years ago, and we are here, of course, at the Vivekananda International Center. So it's quite fitting that it is this event is happening today. Sorry. And between these two events, which seem to have happened on the same date, we see both conflict and perhaps in what Swami Vivekananda ji had seen earlier, a pre-scientific sort of approach to it, where he gave many ideas in terms of how to avoid that conflict in his seminal address. So that's just by way of setting the stage. We've been based in Geneva for many years. I've been there for more than 15 years. I'm not a Swiss citizen, but I do share the fact that I'd like to share that Kansorji was born in Geneva, so there's a little connection there. And Geneva, as you know, is the hub of international organizations. So a few years ago, we established Dharma Alliance there. And just to, and I'd first like to just talk about, oops. I think somebody might have to do this there. It doesn't seem to be working. No. Maybe somebody can just change the slides when I say next. Yeah. Just change it. Just do a arrow front or something when it. Yeah, that was fine. Yeah, so I'll start with the whole, the idea of mindful communication. And there's a bit of a interesting, shall we say, binary going on there. I mean, when we look at mindfulness, just in terms of very ordinary, simple search definition, it says mindfulness is a type of meditation in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment, without interpretation or judgment. Now, if you think about it, the manifestation of this terminology, this framing, is very inward and very individual. And when you link it and layer it on what the role of Dharmic organizations have been in terms in the context of mindfulness, they have been, of course, traditionally the knowledge centers globally. They are the ones who pioneered these ideas, they brought forth the ideas, etc. And where a lot of the practices have been refined, people go and learn, etc. However, and at the same time, the owner and interpretation and application at a much larger level, if you think about it, Dharmic organizations are active, but the international organizations, or which could even be non-dharmic or secular, so to speak, those actors are quite strong, which is partly the reason why mindfulness is such a well-known term. Now that's wonderful, that's very good. However, when we bring communications into it, if we look at it, the basic manifestation of communication primarily, at least as is commonly understood, is outward. So it's individual, and it could be individual, of course, individual communication, but outward, or institutional, which is again outward. Now, when we look at Dharmic organization, particularly in our part of the world, there are many organizations from the communication perspective which are active at the domestic and regional level, but at the international level, there are hardly any Dharmic organizations which are effectively communicating. And that's a big gap. That's an institutional gap which we need to think about. And I'll develop this idea further through the presentation. And then when you come to the ownership and the interpretation or even the application of this communicating mindfulness aspect, it's primarily international or non-dharmic organizations which have got the ownership over it. There are many reasons for it. There's a lot of politics. We understand that. But at the same time, we need to be, to begin with, aware of that. Next, please. Now, just some thoughts. So, coming from this matrix, if you will, the Dharmic organizations, in effect, that I think very confidently say, have excelled at developing and preserving the deep knowledge with universal applicability through the inward-looking process, which is the source of mindfulness. Of course, it's that inward-looking process. We know we just went through a small little exercise with Shantamji just now as well. But Dharmic organizations have been less successful, I would say, not very successful. I'm being a bit, been much less successful in owning and sharing these ideas beyond the immediate world. So in our own worlds, yes, we've been managing to do that fairly successfully, but we haven't gone beyond our own immediate worlds, which is why perhaps we need to focus now on the communication part of it, looking outward and proactively engaging with the larger world but I would focus on this and we'll come to it again, in an institutionalized manner. Next, please. Now, when I say institutionalized manner, where is the institutionalized international engagement taking place and how does it take place? One of the ways in which the international, this is just one proxy, I'm just using this as an emblematic example. One of the ways in which, let's say, Dharmic organizations could interact and engage with international agenda setting organizations or the international systems and institutions is through what is called through the civil society process, and the typical formalized way of doing it is through ECOSOC accreditation. This is a UN accreditation system whereby civil society organizations can engage formally with the international system. Now, if you look up, there are more than 4,000 international such NGOs or civil society organizations, out of which there's only these, I think roughly about 13 or 14 organizations which have directly something which are overtly talking about Dharma or Dhamma. In comparison, many other groups have similar organizations in the hundreds, if in the thousands, if not. So we are already institutionally, we are very absent in such spaces. Next, please. Now, this is part of the reason why we set up Dharma Alliance in Geneva. As you know, it is a hub of global governance, and we decided we needed to be there to do something more effectively. And over the last few years, we've been trying to open this Geneva window. And I'll share with you some examples of the ways in which we've been doing this communication, this outward aspect over the last few years. Please, next please. Last year it was the first sort of event of its kind ever to have been held at the UN headquarters in Geneva, where we did a panel in partnership with multilateral organizations, including the UN Alliance of Civilizations, as well as the UN University for Peace, where this topic was specifically on peace building, sustainable development goals, both themes which are very important for today's conclave. and Dharma cultures. This was the first time Dharma cultures were, articulated and presented in a very specific topical thematic fashion. You will see in the photograph that Most Venerable Professor Dr. Thich Nhat too is there. He's addressing the gathering there. And again, this is one of the first times. In fact, at the end of the session, it ended with a prayer session, which it's singing, so it wasn't an chanting of prayers. And some people who were in the audience, they had tears in their eyes, and they said, look, we never thought we'd see something like this. We've been living here in Geneva for the last 4 decades, 40 years. We've never seen something like this. So there is something, and at the same time, the participation was not only with Dharmic people or Dharmic individuals from this part of the world. There were individuals from multilateral organizations which are participating. As you can see, there was the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, there was UNESCO, there was the University for Peace, and various other multilaterals which are a part of it. And they get it. The point is they get it. They were seeking to engage, and along came an opportunity, and there we were. Next, please. As a result of this is again talking about the outward in terms of also then working towards the norms and standards. The result was, as a result of this particular panel, this discussion, this made its way to the Human Rights Council, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights report to the UN General Assembly, and this report was released this January. It was sent to the UN General Assembly on religious intolerance. For the first time ever, we had the reference to Dharmic cultures in such a report. This has never happened before. Now, the reason is because, again, we sought to engage. We wanted to engage, and we said we have something to say. This is not something. Otherwise, religious intolerance was always primarily limited to a discussion between the usual suspects. This is the first time Dharmic groups came and said, look, we have a position on religious intolerance, and we'd like to share that with you. And this made its way to the General Assembly. Now, this may seem one small paragraph, the Dharma Alliance, UNAOC, etc., and simply says, panelists introduced and highlighted the core principles of Dharmic traditions, primarily Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, and Sikh traditions, which encourage global ownership of and adherence to sustainable development goals. That's it. It's just a simple line, but that's something which is now being publicly acknowledged in global dialogues and systems and being recorded in an official manner. Now that gives us a window to build on. Next, please. Similarly, we were talking about in the morning, this thing came up about science and technology, and we've been, again, promoting various aspects and application. So it's more policy-oriented application of Dharmic thought and philosophies. So we've been doing a lecture series on sustainable development goals and Dharma traditions. We've been bringing and showcasing scholars and academics with hard data, with methodological tools which are modern in nature. So here we specifically we had a lecture on mindfulness and mental health. What does the scientific evidence say? And that's what becomes important when you're working at the international level, because that's the currency. Rationality, science, methodology, tools, these things are elements which are very important for us to effectively be taken seriously. Otherwise, it remains at the rhetorical or theological level, which is wonderful, but we need to get down to the specific nitty-gritties. Now here, because of the nature of the kind of evidence, we partnered with the World Health Organization. Now what are we trying to do here? The World Health Organization is a norm-setting, agenda-setting organization globally. Now, they've got a whole section and they've got a whole division working on mental health. Now, we are working with them now to say, look, you need to start looking at mindfulness as a technique in a much more serious way because it is scientific, here's the evidence, etc. As things move along, we'll be getting into more research-oriented projects with them so that eventually within the next few years at spaces like the World Health Assembly, this becomes translated as a global norm. Now, it may well be that at the global norm level, it may not necessarily say, yes, mindfulness is a Buddhist practice or a Dharmic practice. Maybe that specific word does not come into the picture when it comes into the standard setting space. But at the same time, it's very critical that it is acknowledged as mindfulness, and anybody with a little bit of common sense knows where the source is. So there are different ways of approaching, but these are specific things of how we want to make sure that the genius of Dharmic cultures, which are actually very practical in nature, are reflected in global policies and standards. Next, please. Some of the things which we are coming up and building on from here. On the 4th of October, and I'd encourage you to look at our website, you'll get more details there. It'll be the first ever official side event on Dharmic cultures and human rights, which will be held at the 57th session of the Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council was established in 2006. We've had 57 sessions, and never has there been ever a session where Dharmic cultures have gone forth and said, we have something to say on human rights. Our thinkers, our sages, our founders, our sacred texts, there is so much there which we need to and have to share with the world, but articulated in a manner which is understandable to them. And that's where the global norms come from. Human rights has always been seen as a very Western construct. Of course, there's a lot of politics in all of this, but at the same time, we have to go forth and say, look, it's not as if human rights or the idea of human rights is alien to 1/3 of the population of the world. No, it's there. We have a position on it. Here's what it is, and we want to engage constructively with you. This, of course, we'll be doing in collaboration with the Asian Buddhist Conference for Peace. Chandraji is here, Budin Baiji is here. We're working very closely together on this. We'll have scholars from different parts of the world. We also will be including, and that's a critical, and that's where some of the politics comes in. The UN Special Rapporteur for Minority Issues is also going to be joining the panel. Why minority issues? He's an independent expert, part of the UN system, but away from it. The reason he is important because we are also suggesting that Dharmic cultures are global minorities. Usually in the context of minority discussions around minority issues, it's usually looked at within the national framework. But at the global level, we are minorities and we need therefore protections. And that's why how gradually we want to change the entire language, the narrative around Dharmic cultures and their place in the world. Of course, the University for Peace is also there, with whom we are working very closely. Oops, I need to rush. We have a lot of institutionalized engagement with as we said, High Commissioner for Human Rights. This is one point I want to just spend a little bit. We are also now looking at the specific norms and standards. Discussions of the terminology of faith for rights. What is faith? This morning, this came up. Is it really religion? Is it faith? All of this framing has come up from a very different worldview. Dharmic cultures have very different worldviews, and we want to make sure that our perspectives are reflected in these global terminology, the scope and standards which are being developed. So these are some of the other entities we are working quite closely with. Specifically on the media part, we are developing a project whereby we would like to identify and work with global media influencers and actors and take them on curated exposure trips to Dharmic countries and parts of the Dharmic world so that they understand things a bit better. The fundamental point being engaging with global norm and agenda setting organization in a consistent, constructive and mindful way. Next, please. Conclusions. Conflict avoidance, peace, sustainable development are real global concerns. International organizations are interested and willing to engage with Dharma. Mindfulness and other Dharma practices are accepted and popular. Communication is key. It must be regular, proactive, structured and institutionalized, framed and contextualized using appropriate methods and language. And just one last point, please. Next, please. This is, I think, just should be sounding, to round it off. The Buddha emphasized balance in the middle path, but perhaps we need to find the right balance between inward thinking and outward action. Had he not communicated, none of us would have actually known about his profound experiences and ideas. Importantly, this outward communication was contextualized and institutionalized, which is why it spread and is still here. We need to take communicating Dharmic principles to the next level and proactively seek to influence global processes in a much more structured way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And we must all work at proactively doing just that, and I think that's what we are here trying to do. And on that note, I invite Ms. Emi Hayakawa, who is the head of the global operations at Buddhist True Network, BTN. Now, was this always BTN? It was
always BTN, but it used to be Buddhist Television Network, but now we have a radio, so we're Buddhist True Network now.
Buddhist True Network, the world's only non-sectarian Korean Buddhist TV channel headquartered in Seoul. Under Ms. Hayakawa's leadership, BTN has become instrumental in propagating Buddhist Dharma and cultivating Korean Buddhism throughout the world. So I feel that she is the perfect person to follow Dr. Sharma in talking about how to implement.
Thank you, Nicholas. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge IBC and Vivekananda International Foundation. Thank you for inviting all of us. And I'd like to thank all of our distinguished guests, delegates, and our Dharma brothers and sisters. Just as Nicholas introduced, I'm the head of global operations at BTN Buddhist True Network, headquartered in Seoul, Korea. I'd like to introduce BTN briefly. BTN, the world's leading 24-hour operating non-sectarian Buddhist propagational media, will celebrate 30 years of establishment in 2025. So since 1995, BTN has been the undisputed pioneer in Korean Buddhist media landscape, operating on all digital platforms from cable TV to smartphones. BTN not only operates on media, we also operate various Buddhist-related services such as BTN Tours for domestic and international Buddhist pilgrimages, Bulgukto, a Buddhist funeral service, and we also operate a religious nonprofit 501c3 nonprofit in Los Angeles, California called BTN World. Furthermore, to expand our global reach, BTN established the official YouTube channel in 2013. And the integrated app-based broadcasting technology with our smart radio, BTN Radio Ullim, in 2015. In 2024, the official YouTube analysis platform recognized the BTN YouTube channel as one of the top 1% of YouTube channels worldwide. This is a testament to our digital strategy and content quality. BTN's official YouTube channel has received the YouTube Golden Button for reaching 1.1 million subscribers. We have over 22,000 videos uploaded and received more than 531 million views total. BTN also established and operates 16 independent BTN YouTube channels with over 2.1 million total subscribers supporting us. Over the years, BTN has seamlessly delivered original programming and Buddhist news to promote the principles of bodhicitta and foster a compassionate and loving community that is harmonious and supportive of spiritual growth and understanding. So, talking about our original programs, we have chantings, daily Buddhist news, we have weekly invitational Dharma teachings at our temple studio Musangsat, Dharma teachings with both domestic and world-renowned Buddhist masters of all sects of Buddhism. We have internationally award-winning original documentaries and various domestically acclaimed cultural, propagational, and meditation programs for all of our viewers. We guide viewers in cultivating compassion, loving kindness, and empathy for others and to oneself. So as for the application of mindful communication and conflict avoidance, conflict often arises from misunderstandings and differing interpretations of situations. We at BTN believe that Buddhist media should aim to foster environments that avoid conflict and confrontation on a preventative measure. And on the other hand, if conflicts have already arisen, our programs can enhance one's understanding and application of the Buddha Dharma to help individuals manage and resolve them independently. So in case of the BTN News, as for the journalistic side, BTN News Bureau broadcasts our daily Buddhist news twice a day. We have our principle on mindful journalism. Our journalists pursue truth through the lens of the Buddha Dharma, offering news briefs that avoid sensationalism and violence. Mindfulness communication helps avoid harsh words and misunderstandings that could escalate into conflicts. BTN News consciously highlights stories of reconciliation and conflict resolution when reporting the basic facts of various incidents. We do not highlight conflictual and provoking elements, but sometimes even selectively exclude them. Amidst the flood of sensational and provocative information in our digitally intertwined world, people have become overwhelmed without the time to reflect or process various different information. BTN's journalism, with its Buddhist perspective, serves as a unique guide to help audiences navigate this overwhelming flow of information. Through our style of mindful journalism, we offer a beacon of light to dispel the darkness and hold the Dharma like a lamp, just as Shakyamuni mentioned before he entered Nirvana. We promote well-being, encouraging positive societal change, and more profound understanding, inspiring hope for a better future. So I'd like to give a brief example of this kind of mindful journalism that we do. The bereaved families of the Itaewon crowd crush, which killed 159 young people in the entertainment district of Itaewon in Seoul during Halloween on October 29, 2022, have been in conflict over the legality of the memorial altar being set up at the Seoul Plaza by the bereaved families and supporters. The relocation agreement was reached after months of conflict between the families of victims and the Seoul metropolitan government following disputes over the latter's demand for the removal of the altar, which it viewed as an illegal installation. Major news channels focused on grief, anger, and conflict between the bereaved families and the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, failing to bridge the differences. They repeatedly show image of medical staff transporting victims on stretchers, bereaved families mourning and screaming for their children's death, and anguish of their frustration towards the government. As for BTN, when reporting on the Itaewon crowd crush, we took a unique approach. We reported on the current situation. Our focus was on healing and conciliation. We highlighted the Choge Order Social Labor Committee, a committee of monastics comforting the bereaved families with Buddha's teachings, praying for the victims' rebirth in paradise, and offering counsel and support for a new beginning between the government and the people. The Buddhist community, including Sangha and lay people nationwide, gathered to pray and aid the situation, giving viewers hope. In Buddhism, we call this bodhicitta. As for our original programming, BTN has continually created programs that provide teachings and ways for people to apply the Buddha Dharma in their daily lives. Our original programs guide viewers to cultivate an environment that helps people reflect on themselves and develop a more compassionate mindset and behavior that naturally prevent conflicts from arising. For example, in our program, Go Inside Global, the BTN host, a nun and a lay student, aim to highlight contemplative practices, meditation, and their applications by interviewing world-renowned meditation teachers and exploring their meditation centers and programs. So far in this program, we interviewed the Sea Education, Dr. Lobsang Tenjin Neki. We also interviewed the Brother Hu from Deer Park Monastery, Roshi Joan Halifax, and much more. Through these discussions with the renowned meditation teachers, we offer space for viewers to delve into more profound questions by looking within themselves and asking, are you really healthy? Are you truly happy? Meditation programs like Go Inside Global offer a reflective space for individuals to reconnect with their true nature and apply Buddhist teachings to their internal and external conflicts. We offer a safe space for our viewers to have themselves recognize the nature of impermanence and empower them with transformative insights that inform and guide them to a constructive and beneficial way of alleviating their suffering caused by various conflicts. In conclusion, BTN's focus on empathy, enlightenment, and the welfare of all beings guides our viewers to see a compassionate alternative to conflicts. It instills a sense of empowerment to encourage mindful communication that is truthful, beneficial, and spoken with kindness and goodwill, which aligns with the right speech aspect of the Eightfold Path. Just as India's Prime Minister Modi had addressed in his interview during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Buddha is peace. The practice of Buddhism is the path to peace. We should open the path of world peace based on Buddhist practices and meditation. By taking refuge in the Triple Gem, BTN follows in the Buddha's footsteps, embodying his teachings in all contents we broadcast. At times, BTN serves as a compassionate Dharma teacher offering clear guidance on life's challenges, while at other times, we are supportive Dharma brothers encouraging spiritual growth. BTN's contribution to the rich history of Korean Buddhism and traditional Buddhist culture are significant. Our steadfast commitment ensures a bright and hopeful legacy for future generations, for conflict reduction, fostering a culture of understanding and respect within our communities, and enhancing a sense of connection and empathy among our viewers. Thank you for your time.
I thank Ms. Emi Hayakawa for her presentation of what BTN is up to. Mindful journalism in practice. I think that we can all learn from that and become inspired to bring mindfulness into whatever it is that we engage in. Thank you. Our last speaker on this panel is Mr. Piyush Kulshreshtha, and who is he's the Chief Operating Officer of the Vipassana Research Institute, which is in Bombay, and the founder and CEO of Conclave, an Indian-centric conversational social networking platform aimed at strengthening a variety of Indian ecosystems, including education. I'm looking forward to hearing about both these. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Respected bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, Dr. Arvind Gupta of VIF, Rinpoche Chodin, Abhijit Haldarji, both of IBC, and all our friends here. We are here today to essentially have a discussion on the application of mindful communication for avoiding conflicts. Conflict, as we see, is there at multiple levels in life. We see conflicts at a very personal level, the conflict that goes on within an individual, and then we see the extension of the same within the families, within the communities across the nation, and today, as we live in these current centuries, we see them extend internationally. Our own minds are so conflicted. There is so much craving and aversion, so many desires, fulfilled, unfulfilled. And from that perspective, we are here to address a very important question of how we are going to use a tool called mindfulness in our communication to avoid conflicts. Whatever we speak is essentially an expression of what's on our mind. There is not a moment in our lives that is mindless. The mind is there all the time. The only question is, how aware are we of what is going on in our mind? And this question of conflict and avoidance of conflict has been going on for thousands of years. So around 2,300 years ago, we had a king, King Ashoka. He attacked Kalinga. We had massacre at a massive level. In his own rock edict number 13, he says that in the conquest of Kalinga, 1.5 lakh people were displaced, 1 lakh people were killed in the war, and many more lakhs died due to the reasons of war. And looking at this whole violence, which is caused because I want to expand my kingdom, I regret this, and my heart is filled with Dhamma. He uses three specific terms, but we have time to catch up on. This is not the first time he was turning towards the teachings of Buddha. In his third year after the coronation, he saw his nephew, 7-year-old Nigrodh, who was already an Arhat at that age of 7, calm, quiet, so peaceful. Vibrations around him so peaceful. And a disturbed man coming in contact with such a person, feeling the peace. He got a little discourse and he said, okay, I want to take the refuge. And then every day in his home, in his palace, he had many monks, many nuns, to whom he would give alms, from whom he would listen to discourses. From his own minor rock edict, 1, which we find at almost 18 places within India, he says that for about 2.5 years or more, I was a lay disciple, but I did not ripen much. This is a time when he has also got the construction of 84,000 stupas, and still he says, I have not ripened much. Because he's just committed the massive massacre in Kalinga. So he says, all the discourses I've heard, frankly, have not changed me. I've reached nowhere. You see, we have this saying of Kabir, Pothi padi padi jagamua pandit bhaya na koi. You can read as much as you like, but that does not change you. That does not make you a wise person. It only gives you an idea. So for about 300 days, he left his kingdom. He came to the Sangha, walked a good part of India along with the Sangha. In the same Minor Rock Edict 1, he says, I have been with the Sangha for a little over a year, and he had toured by the time of this proclamation for about 256 nights. That is 8.5 months. And there in that very edict he says, I have now ripened. And I see as I toured along India that many people are inspired. And anybody who works on themselves, anybody who meditates can change themselves. It doesn't matter what their social status is. So therefore, I am making this proclamation and I shall continue to make proclamations, which is what you know through the 14 rock edicts, the 7 pillar edicts, and many more minor rock and pillar edicts. On the whole, about 3,580 words are available to us directly from Ashoka. In the 4th pillar edict, he says, because in his edicts, the proclamations, what he calls the Dhamma Lipi, he is all the time inspiring people to be good persons, to change their conduct, to respect their parents, the teachers, the saintly persons from a variety of practices. Throughout the edicts, this is what you find. And then in his rock edict number 4, he gives a testimony. He says he has applied this Buddha Dhamma to the society. It has worked. His people have changed. And because people have changed, the whole environment in his empire has changed. You have to remember, 2,300 years ago, the kind of communication tools, the kind of transportation tools he was using, and he was still in control of 50 lakh odd square kilometers, roughly 5 million odd square kilometers of territory. For another 30 years. On the whole, he ruled for about 41, 42 years. So what did he do? How did he achieve this? what are the principles of Buddha Dhamma that he put to use. A part of it we saw in Mr. Benny's speech. The 4 pillars of mindful communication. 1, be truthful. Being truthful needs courage. Being truthful also needs an art. It's not about just hammering down on people that I'm speaking the truth. So therefore comes the second principle. Be kind and compassionate. That same compassion allows us to be empathetic. In his speech, Mr. Haldar gave the example of, the hill, and people living on 2 sides of the hill, and each referring to the hill by a different name. It's only empathy that gives us this opportunity to understand the other person's perspective. So, the second principle of being kind and being compassionate. And then, because we speak truth, another problem comes in. There can be times when we might be backbiting instead of giving a feedback. Feedback is good, backbiting is not. And lastly, be purposeful. Do not engage in idle gossip. That is exactly where we make maximum mistakes, make loose comments, and which get misinterpreted, and therefore the conflicts arise. But applying this, just like this, by hearing the 4 pillars of mindful communication, may not be entirely helpful. Because we live in a world, you see what Ashoka did. He changed himself first. He said, I have so much desire, I still want to expand my empire, it's got to stop somewhere. He worked on himself. He gave 300 plus days. More than a year actually, he says, so that should have been about maybe 360 to 400, odd days. But that's the kind of time he spent on changing himself first. And he's a brilliant man. And he says, just because I have changed, my citizens have not changed. They will keep on committing crimes. They'll keep on indulging in activities because of which, I may have to act harshly. I must act. So he used wisdom. What kind of wisdom? His experiential wisdom. So this brings us to the 5 principles of harmonious communication. Harmonious communication, where these 4 pillars are guided by the experiential wisdom. In every field, whether it is diplomacy, whether it is, sociology, whether it is any other field, including in Dhamma, it is the experiential wisdom that will actually guide our efforts in truthfulness, in kindness and compassion, in feedback without backbiting, and being purposeful without any idle gossip. It is that experiential wisdom which will tell us everything, and therefore these principles should not be applied blankly. They should be applied with a clear experiential wisdom at our disposal. And we will try, and we will fail, and we will try again, because we will not give up. We've spent so many hours sitting here together discussing this subject because somewhere we do think that we must create the kind of communication that can help us avoid conflicts. So keep that desire going. If we want to be successful, Buddha has also given us these 5 elements of success. First is the resolution, the resolve we have. Higher the goal, higher the amount of perseverance. Just like in school, college, we wanted to score higher percentage, then we have to study a lot. So in the same manner, stronger, the higher the goal that we have chosen in our resolution, more is the perseverance that we need. And we will face difficulties. We have to stay determined. We have to have a strong heart. And we will not just hold the course. We will keep correcting the course. We will keep correcting the course. We'll keep analyzing, just like we do it in software. We keep debugging. We don't give up. And we correct the program eventually. And lastly, all of this must be driven by enthusiasm. If we know the benefits of the resolution that we have chosen, we will always remain enthusiastic about our entire effort. We believe these kind of theoretical frameworks can give us some ideas, but we still need to apply it. While coming here today especially, I was thinking that giving a speech here will not be enough. This teaching of Buddha and this goal of the society, they need to come together. At least on behalf of VRI, the Vipassana Research Institute, we think we will have a discussion with the trust board. We will try to find out if an applicable course with a proper course material, course curriculum can be created and people could join. It might take a year or two to develop anything of this sort, but we shall put a sincere effort in that direction so that we don't just remain at discussing these things and inspiring each other. We go down to actually applying it and bringing small changes around us. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Piyush. And I'd like to emphasize that the practical elements in your remarks are the elements that we all have to put into practice in order to develop our mindful communication and sustainable development abilities. I thank you all. I thank the 5 speakers on this panel, and I would like to end by saying that the things that were discussed today, both this morning and this afternoon, are not concepts. They're not things that we just talk about. And I think that this is where you ended up. These are things that we individually have to apply. Yes, we can discuss with each other how to share them. Yes, we can form techniques by which they can be applied by others, but the most effective way by which we can influence each other and we can influence the world is the effort that we make at influencing ourselves, and that is mindful practice. Thank you. So I think we all stuck pretty much to time, and therefore I hope that we have a little time. We have 2 minutes or 2 questions? 2 questions. Good. We'll have one from here and one from here, I hope. Please, sir.
Hello, Professor. Hello, all speaker. Chantik, article name Muni. I'm from Cambodia. I'm founder of BC News. We call Buddhist Cambodia News. We concentrate on Buddhist theory and also economic business and youth. You talk a lot in the morning and the afternoon about conflict, avoid conflict, mindful, peace, whatever. But today's commercial days, world full of commercials, economic, business, and the young generation really hard to adapt whatever Buddha teaching to the people, normal people, I think. So, but a lot of lesson that Buddha teach Buddhists to be a rich, to be a economist, and to be a successful business. So my question to all of you is, how can we adapt those Buddha lessons and spread it out to the young entrepreneurships or young entrepreneurs in present time? Yes, sir. I think maybe Dr. Prasad
Sharma.
Sama first, and then Mr. Yes. Thank you.
I think the real media people probably will be best placed to answer this, but I think one of the things is just to contextualize. This thing came up in the morning. How does one contextualize? The contexts have changed over the last 2,500, 3,000 years. Contexts keep changing. How do we make what is relevant and interesting to young people? Because the important thing is Buddha's teachings transcend time, because they're at the principle level. Now the challenge is up to us, how we interpret those teachings in a manner which is attractive for young people. I mean, that would be my very instinctive response to that. But perhaps Emmy has some more further insights.
Actually, a lot of the young people are turning away from religion as a whole, not just Buddhism, just as a religion as a whole. I think one of the issues that here in Korea that young people have been turning away from Buddhism is that it's very complex, it's difficult to understand. It's usually the monastics talking to the lay students, and they just don't get it. It's boring, it's not fun, and for us as a Buddhist media, we not only have Buddhist teachings, we have Buddhist talk shows, we invite Buddhist celebrities to talk about a lot of the issues. And right now, even the Choge order of Korea, which is one of the biggest order in Korea, they are getting together, talking to the younger monastics. How can we bring the younger people together? And so I think right now, one of the issue in Korea is that they're not getting married and they're not having children. So the Choge order decided that, okay, so why don't we make couples at this temple environment? So that brings people automatically to the temple, and at the temple, what do? You meditate, you learn. So that way we propagate the Dharma as well, but we also bring the young community together into a Buddhist setting. And what's really important for young people is the fact that, we need to connect. We need to be able to connect with the monastics. We need to be able to connect with, our life experiences to the Buddha Dharma. So it's really important for the monastics and the teachers to understand the young people and not just talk about the Buddhist sutras, but make it more modern, make it more geared towards our current generation. We are saturated with social media, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. So why can't we use those platforms as well? Thank you.
Okay.
Another question from over here. We have one more. Sorry. Go ahead.
So the business part of it, I think business requires its own training. Buddha was not training anybody specifically for business as such, but he was definitely teaching people the ethics. So the ethical part of the business practice is where Buddha's teaching can play the role. 1. 2, he uses 2 words, santussako cha subharocha. Santussako means being satisfied with what is there. Subharo means not to be in shortage of things, not to have dearth of things. We've seen many business persons have joined, practices, Vipassana practice, meditation, etc. What we find is they've changed their business practices. Number 1, towards ethics. Number 2, many reduced their profit percentage. 8.5%, 10%, not more than 12%. So people started practicing in this manner. They're still flourishing beautifully. They continue to be, established business families. So we believe Buddha's teaching can help in terms of setting the right ethics amongst the children or the youngsters and drive them in that direction. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. We have answered all your... Yes, oh, okay.
for Miss Amy. You say that you have improved and developing YouTube channels, right? YouTube channels? YouTube channels?
We have 1.1 million
Yeah.
subscribers.
Can you say who you
okay.
are?
Hi everyone, my name is Bagel. I'm from Mongolia. I'm a journalist at Eagle News TV. And I just curious about the social network because social network is one of the best platforms to improve Buddhism to the people to realize, and it's the best platform. And how can we use social platform such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube to teach the philosophy of the Buddhism, and how do you use it?
Well, I mean, technology is just going to expand and grow. YouTube is just a platform that everyone uses now, right? So, I mean, as a broadcast media, we have a lot of content, but honestly, nobody really watches TV anymore. We watch Netflix, we watch OTT. We want to be on our own schedule, so what's the next step? Let's put it on YouTube. We have all these contents. If it's not going to be watched, it's going to be wasted. And that's just wasted dharma, wasted knowledge. So we're going to put it on YouTube is our next step. So we put it on YouTube, and our contents are very, very well made. And so people are naturally drawn to it. And people that are not even Buddhist, they watch our contents. Young people watch our contents. People from out of Korea watch it because if BTN is on a Korean cable TV, so people that have no access to Korean, our later segment is on social media. So yes, so pretty much as for BTN, we put all our content on YouTube because that is a content that is available for our global reach. So that is how we use platforms.
So I'll end this. I've recently, after many years of living in India in a monastery, gone back to the United States and been asked to help revitalize a Buddhist center in America. And the most interesting and challenging thing is that there is less and less interest in these traditional religious, let's say, ethical paths. And when I've asked advice of my friends' children, because my friends who are all my age are old, and it's the young generation whom we have to learn from, and they all say to me, speak very little. They all say to me, go on Instagram, but no more than 30 seconds. And I think that it's an interesting challenge for us, but we have to speak the language of the people whom we wish to speak to. Yes, slowly, maybe we can extend that, but I think that using these social network platforms and doing so in the manner and in the language of the people we're speaking to is something that we have to learn. But most importantly, we have to practice. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. We've come to the end of the second panel. And before moving on, I request Secretary General of IBC, Jangchup Shodin Rinpoche, to please give away the mementos from IBC and the publication series from VIF. First, the moderator, Khenso Rinpoche Nicholas Vreeland from the US. Next, we have Venerable Odgarid Jagder from Mongolia. Can we please have a louder round of applause, please? Dharmacharya Shantam Seth from Ahimsa Trust, India. Dr. Prashant Sharma, Dharma Alliance, Switzerland. Miss Amy Haley Hayakawa from South Korea. And Mr. Piyush Kulshrestha from India. Requesting all the panelists to come in front for a group photograph. Thank you. Since we are slightly behind schedule, we will not be playing the movie. Can I request Team VIF to please quickly change the panels? The third panel is on environment and sustainable development. This session will discuss how ancient Indian wisdom can play a role in promoting environmental awareness and sustainable development practices. Can I please request everyone to settle down? The moderator of the third panel, Ms. Sonam Yangchen Rana from Nepal. May I please request you to come on stage? The speakers of this session are Lady Mohini Kent Noon from the UK, Mr. Don De Silva from the UK, Miss Alexandra Kelly from Czech Republic, and Professor Rohana Garuthara from Sri Lanka. Joining this panel also is Mr. Ricky Cage. from India. No, sir, we want to the washroom. We actually Ma'am, there's one panelist coming in a minute. You could start. Thank you.
Is this on? Do you know if this is on? Hello? Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon. I know everyone is really tired, so we'll try to stick to the time, 1 hour given to us. And first to say good afternoon again to the organizers, Mr. Haldar and his team at the IBC, Mr. Gupta and your team at the foundation, our esteemed participants, and of course the speakers sitting here with me. What we'll be doing today is just looking at the environment and sustainable development issues. And it's quite opportune because actually we're sitting in the midst of a decade for action, where we'll be looking at the deliverables for the Sustainable Development Goals. We're right halfway and the target time frame is 2030, as many of you may know. And we have a long way to go in terms of the challenges for 2030. We are very, very aware of a lot of the issues that we discussed this morning that is confronting the world. Environmental challenges, the setbacks that with conflict, the issues with inequalities, and also, of course, the world went through COVID, and that in itself has had huge impact on many of the indicators and the work that countries were doing. There is a recent UN DESA, which is the Department for Economic and Social Affairs, a recent report where they talk about, they point to some of the progress made globally, and I think it's important that we highlight that, which basically relates to maternal and child health, women's participation and government processes, and what have you. But the challenges are also there, very serious challenges related to food insecurity, a deterioration of the natural environment, and pervasive inequalities that I talked about. And no surprise that the poorest and the most vulnerable that we keep talking about as a community are the most badly affected, i.e. children, women, refugees, migrant workers, and what have you. So it continues to impact them. And I don't have to say this to you, but I think we're experiencing it firsthand, the impact of climate change and how fast things are moving. This, we've seen on record, this a decade, the warmest decade and the warmest year, and it's impacting our oceans, our land, our forest, our glaciers, and everything that we know. And how do we really deal with that? Those are important questions. I think much of it was answered this morning, at least not full answers, but at least pointing to a different direction, looking at different ways of finding creative solutions, looking at communities and what communities can provide and the lessons that they bring. So it was really refreshing for me to sit here and listen to a lot of the discussions today. I think there is huge scope for collaboration, huge scope for looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, because there are many indicators, 17 of them. I will not go into the details of them, but they all relate to both the environment and the importance of investing in environment for social and economic progress, as well as for sustainable development issues, I think, which is really important if we are going to take forward what we say we will do in this workshop. We're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about different strategies, and I think from a layperson's point of view, we've heard a lot of the conceptual side of the discussions, but from a layperson's point of view, we could also be looking at concepts of karma, which were probably an average Buddhist would relate to, and its impact on the environment, ahimsa, kindness, compassion, relating to the environment. I think those will be the tools that really the sustainable development and environment agenda can take forward. And I hope that the reports that come out from here will be able to link it and share it with the global powers to be, as well as the local and global and regional heads, so that there is that synergy and contact. I have very esteemed speakers here, and I'm sure they'll elaborate on the details and provide their insights into these very important and burning issues, essentially linking up with some of the challenges and opportunities that we face as a globe, but also how do we bring new practices, new ways of doing business, new ways of thinking, alternate viewpoints, ancient traditions we've heard. We've heard about the Buddhist practices, we've heard about the Hindu practices, we've heard about many things, and also bringing what is good in society to bear so that we can find the right solutions and make the lives of people and countries and individuals better. So what I'm going to do now is just introduce my first speaker, sitting on my left, Lady Mohini Kent. She's the author, filmmaker, journalist, and charity worker, and global envoy of the IBC, as well as the chairperson of Lily Against Human Trafficking, and much more. But you can see her biography in the booklets that you have if you want to know more. But I think without any ado, I'm going to ask Lady Mohini to say a few words, to share your insights, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and it's my honor to be asked to speak today. And in London, a post-lunch slot we would normally refer to as the graveyard shift, because the main task of the speaker is to wake up the audience. But you've just mentioned that I'm the founder chairperson of Lily Against Human Trafficking, so I think I'll tell you the story of the eponymous Lily. She was a 4-year-old girl who was sold to a pimp for 4,000 rupees. And at that time, a buffalo cost 16,000 rupees. So by the time our project heard about this nefarious sale, the man had disappeared with the child. So it took time to trace them to Delhi's GB Road, where he had sold her on for 100,000 rupees. So, the profit of 95,000 rupees. And she was rescued, but of course not before the worst had happened to her. And now she's grown up, and her main passion is to teach mothers to love their children. Why? Because her own mother had sold her. She was a prostitute, and she had wanted to fund her drug habit. It's quite shocking, isn't it? But the abuse that was suffered by Lily hurts us all, because we are all interdependent, and that's one of the cardinal teachings of the Buddha. If each one of us lived more mindfully, then things may not have got so bad, where a 4-year-old is sold into slavery of the worst sort. And His Holiness always said, if you want to be happy, be compassionate. If you want to make others happy, be compassionate. And one of the things about mindfulness and communication, one is overt, but it's also energetic. And our actions also energetically help to improve the world. So being aware of our responsibility as a human being must start in the home. Everything else comes after. The school, the institutions, the government, the authorities, and the first teachers are parents. And the point of change is with the individual. When I started Lily, I had no idea if I could make any difference at all. But we have done 32 projects in the past decade. And His Holiness also said once, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. So we human beings were meant to uphold the scales of justice. As the most evolved species, we have a responsibility to nurture our junior partners, the animals, and take care of the well-being of our sacred planet. because the earth gives us great abundance of everything, food, wood, metal, gold, diamonds, and it's a beautiful planet if you compare it to the surface of the Mars or the moon. And instead of being good and courteous guests, we have abused her hospitality. And there is increasing violence, and it looks like the human race is now devouring itself. One of the best images I hold in my heart is the teaching that when you do a walking meditation, even the trees are your Sangha. In that case, how can I pick up an axe to attack one of my companions? In order to care for the environment, we have to learn to love it, and we cannot love what we don't know. So I think one of the main thrust of the media would be to create mindful awareness of the planet and all the other inhabitants who coexist with us. Modern technology has created very extraordinary tools, such as cameras that can penetrate the dark of the ocean floor and film what's there. But what is also there is plastic. Sadly, there is about 8 million metric tons of plastic are dumped into the ocean every year, and it breaks up into smaller and smaller units, which are then ingested by fish and other innocent creatures. And I believe that plastic waste has created about 400 dead zones in the ocean, and about 70% of our surface on Earth is covered by ocean. So we are contaminating the ocean, and we are depleting our natural resources. And I might mention a couple of initiatives which is countering this. One is Save Plastics Project that recycles household plastics, turning it into construction material, outdoor decking, furniture. And the other project is recycles cling film, you know, that ubiquitous covering of all the food containers, especially in London and the West. Cling film is one long chain of carbon, and the project turns it into a substance that can be used in nylons and electric components. And we've been talking about YouTube and all. We live in very interesting times because the age of the print newspaper and the print, magazines and all is passing with this explosion of social media. And one British YouTuber, Lady C, calls it the new Library of Alexandria because there is so much knowledge and information available. There is, of course, lies and disinformation, but we can, and there's plenty of attention-seeking individuals who come and spout, second-hand borrowed wisdom. But there is also the potential to spread our own message of mindfulness, compassion, and interdependence. Our role was that of guardians and peacemakers, but there is violence in the world, and as for the world beyond the human world, it is totally out of balance. Human greed and corruption have created a great imbalance in nature, and that will surely come back to bite us. And we need to, how do we change this? Mindfulness has actually gone out of Bodha Dharma. There is a mindfulness group in the British Parliament, which has more than 250 members. Mindfulness is being taught in some British schools, but just as mindfulness, not as part of Buddhism or any religion. And I think that's the greatness of the Buddha's teachings, and he would not have minded at all. It is said that karma never forgets an address, and the COVID crisis may have been a curtain raiser for the karmic retribution that will come to balance the scales of justice. And we human beings, we clearly have to improve our own behavior. But it's little use in preaching to people to be kind and compassionate, to have ethics and morals, because very few want to be virtuous for the sake of it. And I think we need to be inspired instead by individual stories of heroism, selflessness, love and compassion. And with a dash of humor, if it's possible, as His Holiness epitomizes. And that may be the way forward. Thank you.
very much. Record time.
Record time.
2 minutes. I'd like to open up the floor for any, I wouldn't say comments, but clarifications. Just 2 seconds before we go to the next speaker. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Lots of food for thought, at least for me. No? So shall we go to the next speaker then? Okay. All right. I'd like to introduce Mr. Don De Silva. He's an environmentalist, author, journalist, and a former UN head, intimately involved in the UN processes related to environment and sustainable development, and currently a Buddhist counselor in universities in the UK. Mr. De Silva, shall I? Thank you.
It is wonderful as part of sustainable development to be having our panel chaired by a lady chairperson. And we have also equity in our panel. You have 3 and 3, which is genuine equity. Most venerable, distinguished Dharma teachers, leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and privilege to talk to you a little bit about Buddhism and sustainability. I'm going to be ambidextrous, so I'm going to control the PowerPoint with my left, and I'm going to also do the same with my right so that I can read the text properly. So, thank you to the International Buddhist Confederation.
You want me to do that?
No.
I'll look at what you're doing and I'll follow you.
Oh, okay. No, this is not working. You'll have to time my presentation.
I am timing, don't worry.
Which is one?
Right. Thank you to the International Buddhist Confederation and the Vivekananda International Foundation. This is an interesting piece of history. This is Swami Vivekananda at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, which took place in 1893. And here he is, and he is with Swami Vivekananda is with Anagarika Dharmapala on the right of the image, to his right, and Virshan Gandhi next to Anagarika Dharmapala. Now, how did the modern environment movement start? What are its origins? I'm not so sure that is well known. The initiator, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to U Thant, the third Secretary General of the United Nations from 1961 to 1971. An absolute masterclass in international diplomacy. And where did he get his source from? In the annals of human history, some individuals who have made constructive and sustainable impacts get hidden in the shadows of history. They get really ignored. But one such person is U Thant, hailing from a small village in Pantano in Burma. U, of course, means an honorific title. First of all, he did 2 remarkable world historical initiatives. One, he diffused the Cuban Missile Crisis and stopped the world from going into a nuclear war. Madam Chairperson. The second is that he originated the United Nations initiatives on the environment and therefore globalized the world environment movement. And how did he do that? The Secretary General, and this is taken from the New York Times, the Secretary General from morning ritual was a testament to his nature. According to the New York Times, each morning, after rising at 6:30 in the morning, U Thant of Burma performs a Buddhist rite. He sits quiet alone and meditates, and in those minutes, perhaps 5 or 10, Thant makes no offering to the Buddha, nor does he kneel in prayer. Instead, he sits quietly, yet actively, and strives to attain what he calls humbly the emotional equilibrium. This is what the Buddha talked about, Attanaya Janeyata. Attanaya Janeyata means experiential realization. This is in the Tipitaka, in the authenticated discourses of the Buddha. Then, during the late 1960s, there were people's protest participation because Rachel Carson wrote the book, only one, the one on pesticides. So there was a real firmament. And U Thant, and here's the evidence for you, U Thant in his paper called for the holding of a UN conference on the environment. This is the world's modern historical Earth Summit initiated by a Buddhist. You need to really realize this. His plea was simple: severe environmental challenges and the time to act was now. His clarion call for attention resulted in the first ever global summit, the Earth Summit, in June. So the question one poses is, often I get asked, how do you change the trajectory of the world? Can one person make a sizable change? He did that. The Buddha did it on many different issues. So what is the UNEP definition, where I have worked quite a bit in the United Nations Environment Program? What did we come up with as the definition of sustainable development? Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present generation without jeopardizing the ability of future generations to meet theirs. I won't go into this, it's a long history. Now, more than 2,000, this is, if you are, what I am really concerned about is that when the World Bank goes to the Buddhist countries and they talk about sustainable development, they tend to think that sustainable development came from the moon, that it is something that is new. No, it is not. And here we have the Buddha in the Anguttara 3.7 saying, Digarattang hitaya sukaya, lasting welfare and happiness. What I as an environmental scientist call sustainable development or sustainable welfare and happiness. So the Buddha outlined in his discourses the whole area of interconnectedness, people, environment, and the cosmos. Now here it is. This is his ecological framework. And this is in the, again, Dharmic Sutta. I am not going to be interpreting any text from the Buddha because the Buddha's statements are radical. They don't need interpretation if you go into it. At a time when kings are unprincipled, royal officials become unprincipled. When royal officials are unprincipled, Brahmins and householders become unprincipled. And so it goes on, the courses of the stars and the constellations, the days and nights, the months and the fortnights, the seasons become erratic. Climate change. The heavens don't provide enough rain. The crops ripen erratically. When people eat crops that have been ripened erratically, they become short-lived, ugly, weak, and sickly. And so in this, the converse is true. How am I doing for time?
You have to
Okay.
remind you.
So these are the Sustainable Development Goals 17 adopted by the second Earth Summit, which was held in Rio in 2012, which we put forward to the world governments. 140 countries attended that. So I'm now going to not go through all of this. I'm going to take a couple of these SDGs, and I'm going to show you how this is done and referred to in the Buddha Dhamma. So let's take the first one, Sustainable Development Goal, responsible consumption. And once a king, a ruler, was asked by Ananda, what did he do with all the robes that are given to them as gifts? And so this is Ananda's response was long, but Professor Lily De Silva shortened this so that people could understand it. When new robes are received, the old robes are issued as coverlets. The old coverlets as mattresses, mattress covers, the old mattress covers as rugs, the old rugs as dusters, and the old tattered dusters are kneaded with clay and issued to repair cracked floors and walls. That is sustainable development, ladies and gentlemen. And then comes reducing inequalities, SDG 10. You are not a lowlife by birth, nor by birth you are a Brahmin. You are a lowlife by your deeds, and by deeds you are a Brahmin. So then the Buddha also went into, in some of the suttas, to talk about injustice and hunger. Those who are, and this is what he advised rulers of his time. Those who are poor, in your kingdom, you should provide them with wealth. This is more fulfilling as a moral obligation. Let not injustice prevail in your realm. This is the Buddha Dhamma. It is not only about Sila Samadhi Panya and then going to a retreat and talking about Buddhism. This is a radical transformation of society. So he also, in one of his suttas, talked about the 10 nuns who were the foremost, and one of them was Dhammadinna, who was equal to him in speech. So he says, Pandita Vishaka Dhammadinna. I don't have time to go into it totally, but I'm going to shorten it. You can refer to it in your research. So, Pandita, if you came around to me and asked this question as a way of, like what you did with Dhammadinna, that is what it means, and that is how you should remember. And here is the 16th one, last one, which is about peace, justice, and strong institutions. Dharmic governance. So here we have Samrat Asoka putting the teachings of the Buddha into statecraft. So this is not something that is pie in the sky. This is relevant for the society today, particularly for the climate change negotiations today. And so under his leadership, Pillar Edict 4, death penalty was abolished. Welfare of animals became a state concern. Medical facilities for both people and animals, and so on. And then he also launched the world's most incredible diplomatic initiative, which was to take the Buddha Dhamma to many parts of the world, including, we are fortunate to have received it from Sri Lanka. To Sri Lanka, he sent his own son Mahinda, and then with other Theros as well, and then he paid and did the ultimate sacrifice, which was to send Sanghamitta, whom I call a stateswoman. And this is the first stateswoman in the world. Sanghamitta, the friend of the Sangha, daughter of Emperor Asoka and his wife Devi, together with a group of bhikkhunis, shattered many glass ceilings. You don't need lessons about women and diversity. We have that in Buddhism. And this is written in black and white. So Sanghamitta did not come alone. He came with 12 young visionaries. She handpicked together with Samrat Asoka. And here they are, the 12, the young 12, 30 years old. Uttara, Vikachana, Hema, Pasadapala, Agimitta, Dasika, Peggu, Pabbata, Matta, Malla, Brahmadasya, and this is in the Dipavamsa chapter 10. Please read this, because this is really world history, and there is no parallel anywhere in any of the civilizations to match this. Okay, and here is 2 minutes. And here is Queen Anula, the sister-in-law of King Devanampetissa, who became a Buddhist nun, and she was the first Buddhist nun. And there is her Sitya, or her stupa, was found in Anuradhapura, and it is being renovated now. This is the evidence of it in Prakriti, and it is there for all to see now in the Brahmin script. And this is rock inscription 101. This is the stupa. I have been there. This is being renovated, and I would like you to address this interesting conference, interesting place. The international impact. So what was the impact of Sanghamitta theory and the women's group? I won't go into it in detail, but Dipavamsa says in chapter 13 that they were pandits, scholars, and recounts their prowess. They taught the Vinaya Pitaka and other Nikayas as well. So the Dipavamsa testimony, and I will finish, is that Sanghamitta arrived in 245 BCE by the Sri Lankan king, King Katakanna's reign, and his son. There were 16,000 bhikkhunis in Sri Lanka. Any CEO would like that as an impact audit assessment. So I'm going to now end with the vision of the Buddha. The Buddha gave a very precise vision for the world and for a Buddhist. Bahujana Hitaya, welfare of many people. Bahujana Sukhaya, happiness of many people. And Loka Anukampayo, compassion for the world. And this is the challenge that each and every one of us has. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a fascinating and very, very practical presentation. I wish we had more time, I think, for something like this, but a lot of food for thought. I'd like to go to our next speaker, Alejandra Kali from the Czech Republic, who has been actively engaged in the Institute of Environment and Ethical Education in her country. And she's also been involved with the delivery of the C program, which is the Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning Program, and promoting Tibetan and East Asian culture and philosophy. Alejandra? 10 minutes you have?
Maximum.
Okay.
I will try shorter. Hello, I'm coming from Czech Republic, and I would like to say Tashidele and Namaste to everyone. And thank you for being here so long and taking a lot of attention for this Congress, and especially thank you for invitation to International Buddhist Confederation and Vivekananda Foundation. I'm not a journalist, so I have not so many to say about journalist and social media case. I can just say before I will share to you the presentation that our country is located very close to Ukraine and Russian war, and there is a lot of propaganda and things in the middle, and we have to use our mind to be somehow neutral, and we find out that the best approach what we can use is the language of compassion to really understand the terrible things which happens on both sides. And so I would like to present you our presentation, which was helping me making my colleague, Mr. Jan Formanek. And why I'm saying about my colleague, because I would like to say that any NGO cannot work without others and voluntaries who are very important mosaics, parts for mosaics, which we have to create. So our NGO, it calls Institute of Environmental and Ethical Education. And actually, we are very familiar little NGO working with right now 36 voluntaries. Most of them we are friends. They are different professions, the people who are coming to help us to building the NGO. And then we can bring different professional cases and areas together. So what we are doing, one more. So what we are doing is that we are focusing for two things, and that's environmentalism and ethics. So how we are doing that? It's simple. We are trying to spreading secular ethics from His Holiness Dalai Lama vision. So we are teaching C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning. We start teach that in 2017. Actually, we bring that to our country, and slowly we start adapt all the materials to our language. And in 2017 was a very different situation in our country. Much more well-being was kind of modern but very abstract word. Right now, a situation absolutely different. We are in the year of 2024, bring us many changes. I will say mainly after COVID. People, especially government people, are doing many different kind of reforms, and they are trying to bring well-being, let's use this word, to different changes in the structures, and them efforts are very positive. So they do a lot to implement and adapt different holistic teaching. And most of ethics and teaching is thanks to you, coming from India and from Asian countries. So that's what I would like to say with like big attention and thanks, that maybe sometimes in India, you are looking here for some British school or some system of Montessori schools, or you are looking many different solutions. but we are very thankful to your holistic teaching. And even I started study that when I was 28 years old. It means 12 years back. I have to say I feel always like a beginner, because there is a lot what your generation and native has done. Your roots are very fruitful, so we can use all the roots to really make some bridge to Europe and slowly walk on this bridge to bring your awareness and attention and wisdom for people who can only put the efforts, but for them well-being is still very abstracted. So we need holistic teaching for doing our work well. So if we can go next, yeah. So something about our institution, because maybe some of you you never hear about it, and also we don't have a website in English, so it will be good to say something. Our institution actually started when a very beautiful man, his name is Mr. Milan Klečka. He was working mainly with Mongolia and the Ganden monastery. So Odgar and all the people from Mongolia know him as someone who tried to establish some environmental cases and international projects between two countries, and he did very well, and mainly promoting Buddhism and Mongolian Buddhism and Gelupa lineage and more things in our country. So he established some museum and relation with the Mongolian Museum, first Mongolian Museum in Czechia, thanks to cooperation with a Ganden monastery. And after he gave me the institute because he said he's too old and I'm too enthusiastic, so he won't make me more busy. And he did, and very successfully. So we start focusing much more to spreading. We don't touch too much the environmentalist case because we find out that the environmentalism without ethics cannot work, as ethics and values cannot work with environmentalism. So we look for all like for one subject. So about history, I told you something. Then what do we have else? From since 2019, we cooperate with Emory University as a primary affiliate partner in our country. So we train trainers, we translate all the methodology, we're doing awareness about the sea learning, and right now we have been very lucky because, as I said on the beginning, now I can tell you this like wonderful news and maybe inspiration for other countries that our Ministry of Education is going through one of the biggest reform for national framework of curriculum. And they, let's say, they processing and they offer us to cooperate to bring a sense of all the secular ethics and sea learning, but not just sea learning, also some well-being and inner work to the national framework for curriculum. So we are on the way to start cooperate with them. Even they have a deadline to do in 2-3 years. And we don't know how, then we decide we have to try. And sometimes this is something what I want to say. It's good to find a compromise if the government decide to do something, because they have different timing to finalize the things through different donations and all dotations. So we cannot only make a pressure for how long training need to take. We have to just be flexible to react and find the best solution for them. Yeah, so that's something about our reform and situation in Czechia. And then I want to mention that sea learning is spreading from 2019. It was launched here by His Holiness Dalai Lama and maybe some of you in Delhi. And from this time, it has, by organic spreading, with no many marketing and with enthusiastic and voluntary people. Right now, in 2024, we have sea learning in 59 countries. And the program is still growing and awareness growing with it. So I think it's like very successful result for sea learning researchers and initiative initiative in the world. So what about the Czech teacher and European teachers? So we have 42% of European teachers who really report the stress. But in Czechia, we mapping that there is a 72 teacher who feel under stress. But good news is that 58% of Czech teachers feel to have chance to change their work, and they are open to start work and study and doing something with herself. Yeah, so we are very happy to support this process, and every day coming more people to create this base. Yeah. So here is some resume. I'm looking for, yeah. So we are very lucky to have this precious chance, thanks to teaching oriented in India, to bring to great benefit to bringing to compassion-based teaching to the Western world. Thanks to readiness and openness to find a way to tackle with lack of physical well-being, personal development, and last, find some solution for environmental problems, because it's very connected with it. Yeah, so that's everything, and I would like to thank you very, very much for inviting us.
Thank you, Alejandro, for sharing all those insights on your work in Czech Republic. I think I'll go to our next speaker, Mr. Rohana Garuthara, the Director General of the Buddhist Media Network in Sri Lanka. Sir, you have the floor.
Good evening. Sit down. Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me for this great spiritual gathering. I'm from the Buddhist Media Network in Sri Lanka. I'm a physics professor, not a media man. So first let's look at the environment and sustainability, how then the sustainability development was defined. So this was defined in 1987, to my knowledge, by the United Nations. And it says the sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. You saw this previously. And in 2015, the UN adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The goal is to create a decent lives on everyone on a healthy planet by 2030. So, this sustainable development was based on 3 pillars. First one is social development, second one economic sustainability, and the third one is environmental sustainability. So, let's look at now these 3 things first. The first part is economic, how we are doing this economic development. Let's look at briefly the world GDP per capita during the 20th century. It rose exponentially, actually, from 1900 to 2020. But if you look at today, 40% of the population lives on less than $5 per month. So I don't know, depend on that country, how much they are poor and difficult to live. Okay, so I'm first like to give you some data, since this is not my research, I gathered from research work. So let's look at the population. So today, for example, this region, India, from 1950 to 2023, Indian population was increased about 1.4 billion, and also China and the rest of the countries. And actually, in 1959, global population was 3 billion. In 2024, the global population is 8 billion. That means within 65 years, 5 billion people came to this world. Okay, so let's look at how the global land used for food production. We know the Earth's surface is 29% land and 71% ocean. Out of this 29% land, only 76% is habitable land. In this part, in this land, 45% is now using agriculture and 38% is left for forest. So, if you look at, according to the recent study, croplands has expanded at a rate of 58 times faster than they were 20 years ago. So the croplands and everything, land is increasing. So when these things, population increases, land cultivation increases, so what is the effect on the environment? It is clear from this data that increase in human population has significant impact on the earth in many ways. According to recent study, you saw the land increases by 58 times faster than they were 20 years ago. The utilization rate of earth resources is 1.7 times higher than their generation rate. If things stay the same, if we use these resources consume like this way, we will need 3 Earths to fill our requirements by 2050. So it's a very serious data, if it is correct. Global energy demand is expected to increase 50% over the next 30 years. More than half the world's population lives in urban areas today, but in 2050, this proportion is expected to rise to 68%. We know when the urban population increases, you have to supply more energy, more everything, so there's no time to speak about that. So let's look at currently 2.2 billion people around the world do not have safe drinking water, and 4.2 billion lack sanitation services. This is just data I gathered. So, when the human population increases, of course, emission of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases increases, and the global temperature increases. So if you look at the carbon dioxide, that also increased exponentially. And ecosystem change because of this, rise in temperature goes up, and all species are trying to adapt, some heading towards extinction, because if you cannot adapt, they have to extinct. Since 1979, Arctic sea ice has shrunk by more than 40%. That means sea level goes up. So the land also shrinking. Okay, so I'm doing it quickly. So ecological sustainability is necessary for nature preservation. Let's look at in Sri Lanka, where I came from. Natural forest decreased from 80% in 1820 to 43% in 1948 due to tea, coffee, and rubber plantation by the British. Natural forest cover further decreased to 26% in 2024. That means in Sri Lanka now we have only 24% forest. In Sri Lanka's land area is 65,500 square kilometers, and the country is right around is ocean, so it's an island. Therefore, life there in forest life, animals very precious. So there are about 3,500 floral species. about 875 flora species in Sri Lanka is endemic. Only to Sri Lanka, 875. Also, Sri Lanka is home to 21 species of endemic mammals, 26 species of endemic birds, 113 species of endemic reptiles, and 112 species of endemic amphibians, 50 species of endemic fish. So, biodiversity plays a very important role, process to life on Earth. The health of our ecosystem, including the air we breathe and the food we eat, is depend on biodiversity. Recently, I'm just giving you some information. A wind energy project is in Mana district was awarded to Adani Green Energy Limited by the Ministry of Power and Energy. The project consists 52 giant wind turbines in each 220 meters tall. According to the scientist, the project possesses a service threat to the island's unique biodiversity and pristine landscape. According to Dr. Rohan Pettiagoda, he's a very eminent scientist in this area, Mana, this is the place where they are going to have these turbines, is a crucial region that houses millions of birds from diverse species. Every year they are coming from all over the world, and this is the migratory path, corridor for birds. So definitely they have a threat. So, the world has seen average 68% drop in mammals, bird, fish, reptiles, and amphibians populations since 1970, according to the wildlife data. So, very recently, the United Nations Secretary General said, we are out of harmony with nature. Humanity has become a weapon of mass extinction. So, now we have to think, when you look at this data, we are Buddhist. Why it happened? We always look at the cause. Buddha teaches us to think about the cause, not supernatural powers. So let's look at the cause here. We know, according to Buddhism, in deep, there's a thing called, the core Buddhism is Paticca Samuppada. The fundamental concept of Buddhism is dependent origination. Everything is dependent, which provides an explanation for the cause of suffering. Of course, here the suffering is because lack of Four Noble Truths. Existence is viewed as a flux of phenomenal events that are interconnected and without any real permanent or independent existence of their own. So this is very deep. I'm a physics person. I'm still learning about these things. We all have to learn this very deeply. So to understand this deeply, of course, we have to go more and more into the Buddhist practices. Let's look at a human being. If you look at the human being, according to Buddhism, human being means we have 6 senses. They are nose, tongue, body, and mind. But I don't know here, with my experience in Sri Lanka, most of the people, especially young crowd, never think about there is a mind that's a sixth sense. They think only five senses. So they are trying to have more happiness, more fun, more enjoyable things using their five senses. Because of that, in Sri Lanka, some young crowd all over the world, I cannot say, they even inject very strong, dangerous chemicals to their body to have fun. There's no mind. In Sri Lanka, for example, there are about 23 million people. They consume about 600,000 liters per day alcohol. Here I notice India is very high number. So, the mind-body function as a pair of firewood according to Buddhism. They are leaning against each other. If you take one, the other will definitely fall. So that's where the problem is, not thinking or paying attention to the mind, which is Buddhism. Today, people are not concerned about the mind, but more concerned about their other five senses to me. So, if the mind is clear, whatever you do or say will bring happiness, and that will follow you like your shadow. We are what we think, all that we are arises with our thoughts. This is Dhammapada, the sacred scripture of Theravada Buddhism. And this teaches us the middle path is the Buddhist way of life, a progression of self-development through noble eightfold path leads to the developed qualities of virtue, concentration and wisdom, or sila, samadhi, prajna. However, this must be based on, we cannot go immediately with this, based on morality. In order to purify both the verbal and bodily actions, Buddhists undertake to observe 5 precepts or pansal we just had at the beginning of this meeting, which are recited daily by abstain of destroying life, abstaining of stealing, abstain of sexual misconduct, abstain of lies, and abstain of intoxicating drinks. So, this is my speech, since time up. So, what I strongly believe is, if you do any work before that, if you have always, or whether you are media or whatever it is, if you say, I'm saying a holy Buddhist prayer, Sabba papassa karanang kusalassa upasampada sachitta pariyo dhapanang etam buddhana sasanam. If you follow this path, you do everything wonderful, and the 17 SDG goals will be a success. Otherwise, believe me, I personally believe there's no success. Always we can put a patch. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garuthara. The middle path, I think we've heard that. I'm looking at what Mr. Gurumurthy said this morning. It somehow sat in my head, the con and the text. I'm looking at the faces, so I think we'll try to move quickly. And my last but not the least, the speaker is Ricky Kay. I think he's a well-known musician, but one thing from his thing that had caught my eye was he was the GQ Man of the Year last year. Okay, so here, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Check. Okay. I think I can't see a couple of people over there, so I'll just use the podium.
Yeah.
Okay, namaskar everyone. Namaskar, everyone. Namaskar. Thank you so much. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to speak a little bit about communication and the environment. Now, I'm a musician, I'm an environmentalist, two pillars that have pretty much dictated my whole life and every single life decision that I've ever made. So I'll do a small exercise over here because we've been speaking a little bit about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam since morning. That is, the world is one family. So let's do an exercise. Are you ready for that? I'm going to ask you questions and you need to answer me back, but loudly. Are you okay with that? Yes. Will you answer me? Yes. Okay, so my name is Ricky. What's your name? What's your name? Okay, fine. I heard everybody. Okay. I live in Bangalore. Which city do you live in?
Kathmandu.
Fantastic. I live in a country called India. Which country do you live in? Okay. Which planet do you live on? Yep. So, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one family, one planet, one common future. So that itself shows that, that all of us have got one common future and we all need to work towards it. So anyway, we also spoke a little bit about sustainable development. Now, if you look at the word development, or you look at the word develop itself, if you look at the word develop, since time immemorial, if you look at all the translations of the word develop in any kind of ancient culture anywhere in the world, it's always meant progressing forward in an inclusive manner and not against the environment. It's always meant that. But right now we've hijacked that word so much so that when we think about the word develop, the only thing that comes to our mind is basically, the New York skyline, concretization, big lights at the night time, tall buildings, private jets. That's all that we think about when we think about the word developed. So much so that we've got another phrase, which is called sustainable development, which talks about progressing responsibly in collaboration with the environment. When actually by default, development itself should mean, responsibly progressing forward. So actually speaking, if you think about it, if all of us followed the ideals of ancient Indian ideals and Buddhist ideals, then we would not need a term called as sustainable development. Development by itself, by default, would mean in collaboration with the environment, and we would have another term for unsustainable development, but I do not know what that term would be called. Anyway, so with all the problems that we face on our planet, whether it's environmental problems or whether it is social problems, we've got so many environmental problems like climate change, deforestation, species extinction, plastics pollution, air pollution, so many social issues that are all interrelated with environmental issues. I believe that the biggest threat to us as a species is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference. We're always waiting for governments, for intergovernmental bodies, for corporations, for leaders to make a difference, when the truth is that the only way we can bring about meaningful change is if we bring about changes within our own behavior. We constantly talk about changing the world, and you and I am guilty of that, but we constantly talk about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that is not because we're evil people. It's simply because, the way that we've been educated, the way that we've been taught, the way that we've built systems around us, we just believe that we are very insignificant. That if I stop using single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or, if I reduce my dependence on fossil fuel, what difference will it make? Or if I'm kind to people, if I'm compassionate, what difference will it make? But it actually makes a huge difference. All that we need to do is encourage ourselves to make these tiny incremental changes within our own lives. And that's all that matters actually. So how do we do that? How do we encourage everyone around us and ourselves to be the change that we want to see? Now we can showcase a ton of scientific data, which is really important, but we can showcase scientific data to people, but it will not change mindsets. We can showcase a whole lot of analytics and data, and it will not change mindsets. Now here in this conference, we're talking about communication, we're talking about media. So what is important is for us to use the language of arts, and in my case, music. Use the language of arts and take these complex ideas and thoughts, like the scientific data and these analytics and these statistics, and simplify it through the emotional language of the arts, in my case, music, so that you're hitting the hearts and souls of people. And that is what will bring about an emotional reaction, and that is what will change mindsets. So what is extremely important is for artists to constantly collaborate with scientists. And the scientists do what they're good at, of figuring out what our problems are and figuring out the solutions. And artists need to communicate this. So it needs to be, because artists are not are not the best people to figure out what our problems in our world are, and scientists are not the best people to communicate. So there needs to be a collaboration between these two people. Now, I'm a product of Samvad, which happened right here in this hall in 2015. Because that is where my pathway of bringing my music and my environmentalism came together through that particular program. So I'm very grateful to the Vivekananda International Foundation, to the IBC for this. But over there in that particular program, while I was watching it, Prime Minister Modi quoted a very important quote from Buddhism. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know it by heart, but I'm going to paraphrase it. But this is what he said in general, that the impurities in the ecosystems, the impurities of our environment is directly connected with the impurities in our mind. So in order to purify the environment, we have to purify our mind, and vice versa. And this is very, very important because we need to start looking inwards. And we do not need any scientific data to prove this statement because it is so obvious that, if our mindsets are not pure, if we are facing mental health issues, obviously that is going to showcase, that's going to show its effect on the people around us, on the environment around us, and on everything and everybody around us. So I guess what needs to happen is that we are focusing too much on symptomatic treatments and symptomatic solutions when it comes to the environment. What we need to do is that we need to go to the roots of the problem, and the roots of the problem is basically this. The root of the problem is that we need to be a far more compassionate society, and we need to clarify our minds, and we need to take care of our mental wellness, because that is what we are lacking right now in this world. We are lacking good mental wellness everywhere, and I think Buddhism and ancient Indian traditions can play a very important role with this. Now, when it comes to the problems of our environment, there are two ways to communicate our problems. There are two major ways to communicate, and this is sort of an appeal to my friends in the media over here. Now, one way is to shame people into action, to use doom and gloom, and as I said, shame people into action. And that is what I broadly call the Greta Thunberg approach. You know, the Swedish student who's an environmentalist. I've met her. I believe she's quite genuine, but at the same time, the thing is that she uses doom and gloom, and she uses shaming people into action as a method for getting to an end goal. Now, sometimes this is very short-lived. The effects of this is very short-lived. It may work sometimes to shame a government into action or something like that, or shame a corporation into action. It may have a short-term effect. But on individuals, I do not believe it has much of an effect, simply because instead of drawing people in, you are actually pushing people away. Now, the second approach is what I call the Sir David Attenborough approach. You know, the famous UK naturalist, Sir David Attenborough. Sir David Attenborough uses the approach of, let's make everybody fall in love with the natural world, and hopefully through that love, we will find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and to sustain. So that is basically showing what the beauty of the world that remains, showcasing animals that we've normally never been exposed to, showcasing the beauty of wildlife that normally we would never see in our lives, and showing people what is out there and the beauty of the world that is out there. And then we have to find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and sustain. Now, every single conservationist anywhere in the world has been inspired by Sir David Attenborough in the long term. So that is why I believe love can play a very important role in creating a more eco-conscious society. One more example that I'll just quickly give is that, let's say Mr. Gurumurthy, he spoke about meat consumption. Now, the thing is that one can shame people into action about meat, saying that, you know, it's got a large carbon footprint, it's got this, there's a compassion issue when it comes to it. You can do all of that. Now, there is one individual called, and I'm giving this as an example of effective communication. There's one individual called Gene Bauer in America. He runs this organization known as Farm Sanctuary. Now, what is this organization? He's created petting zoos using animals that are normally slaughtered. You know, like pigs, chickens, goats, lambs, sheep, cows. He's created this beautiful, multiple of these farm sanctuaries across America, and he organizes school trips. And when he organizes school trips, children come over there, and normally if you go to a slaughterhouse, the pigs are very violent, because they always think that if a human being is coming close to me, they're going to either cut off my ear, or they're going to brand me, or they're going to take away my child, or they're going to take away something from me. But in this case, when the children move towards the pigs just go back on their back, and they just want a belly rub because they're conditioned for love. And then they show a close association with the kids that, you know, that this is what, when you're eating a chicken nugget, this is exactly what you're eating. Or you're eating a hamburger, this is the animal that you're eating. So they're using love for positive reinforcement. Same thing with clothes. Like I've started this hashtag known as Rewear for Earth. Hashtag Rewear, numeric for Earth. It's about rewearing your clothes because fast fashion is one of the most polluting industries on this planet right now. In fact, this suit that you see me wearing, if you go onto my Instagram, you'll see it in at least 12 to 13 different events just this year. Because I only have 11 sets of clothes and I keep re-wearing these clothes. And if you go to any of my concerts, you'll see me wearing the exact same clothes for a concert. Sometimes for about 60 to 70 concerts, I wear the exact same clothes. Because the earth does not remember what you wore in the previous party, but the earth remembers how you treat it. And fashion can always be fashionable more than once, but right now we have this paradigm among young kids that you cannot repeat the same costume twice on Instagram, or you cannot repeat the same costume twice to public events. What we need to do is that we need to rewear our clothes in public events, post photographs of that on social media and double down on it that I'm being more responsible for the planet. That is why I'm doing this. And it's going to be good for us financially. It's also going to be good for our mental health. So I'm going to end with what Baba Diome, a famous Senegalese philosopher, he had once said that at the end of the day, we as human beings, we will only protect things that we love. Because that's how we are. As human beings, we'll only protect things that we love. We will only love things that we understand, and we will only understand things that we are taught. So all of us need to make it our mission through our communication, through our media, through our social media, everywhere. We need to make it our mission, as I said, to make everyone fall in love with the natural world by education, make everyone fall in love with the natural world, and hopefully through that love, we will all find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and to sustain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricky, and for placing love at the center of our response. Very interesting talk. I'm going to open it up. We have a few minutes before we break for tea. I think just 2 minutes if anyone has any questions or too tired. Yes, please.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Tripti Nath and I represent Strat News Global. My question is to Lady Noon. It was a very interesting presentation you made, ma'am. My compliments. You talked of the British group on mindfulness. I would like to know more about it.
Well, it's a group in Parliament. It has members both from the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and that also includes the staff. And I think on Tuesday evenings they used to have a session. So I presume that's still going, and it had about 250 members. But as I said, that it's not linked, they're not Buddhists. It's just practicing mindfulness. So that's been introduced in schools also, possibly through this group.
Somebody teaching them mindfulness.
Who's teaching them mindfulness? How to
No,
practice
they
it?
themselves, some of them are practitioners, long-term practitioners of meditation. So, you know, I think it's a kind of self-generated group. It's not a class.
Yes, Mr. De Silva, you
May I add
yes,
to that excellent response? So in the UK Parliament, there is the APPG/M, which is the All-Party People's Parliamentary Group on Mindfulness. That consists of people from various different political parties. And for your information, the report that Lady Noon was talking about is the Mindfulness Report, and you can download this online. It is available for you to look at. And it contains, and what I find when I listen to some of the parliamentary debates is how open some of the members of parliament are concerning their own mental health and well-being issues. They're very open about it. Now, the ones who are training them are several organizations. The Oxford Center for Mindfulness is one. which is leading the training. So there are various different groups and there are various different qualified individuals, psychotherapists, psychologists, who go to Parliament and then conduct mindfulness training sessions. I have been to one.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Otherwise, everyone's ready to break for tea, I see. Yeah, you want to say something?
One of the founders is a friend of mine, Lord Andrew Stone. Now, you know, the interesting thing is that we are not living in religious societies anymore. And there's a great deal of personal freedom. So he is by birth and whatever Jewish, but he does, you know, practices mindfulness. He's attached with the, what is the thing in Oxford, the Brahma Kumaris, you know. And he's helped me to host a yogi in the House of Lords, and we, in fact, did our best to try and get His Holiness invited, but then there was other sort of resistance. So the people have this individual freedom. So he is a very long-term practitioner of meditation. He gets up at 5 a.m. So there are people like that. And secondly, the House of Lords itself is a very big resource group. There are people there who are top of their fields, you know, whether they're doctors or they are union leaders or they're lawyers. So a lot of information is already available among the membership.
Thank you. And to be continued over coffee if you want to have further discussions. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists. We'll now have the mementos. May I please request Deputy Secretary General of IBC, Venerable Khemachara Bhante, to please give out the mementos from IBC and VIF. First, moderator